Bonjour à tous et à toutes. This will be an English language session. We're going to be talking about making mobile apps for little kids. My name is Kathryn Rotondo. I'm an American. I live in Germany. And I've been programming since computers looked like this. That was one of my first, I don't remember if it was Logo or Basic programs back in like 1986 or 88 or something. Since being a kid, have been interested in drawing things on the screen, using code to make visual things happen. And that led me to be a Flash developer for a long time while that was a thing. Anyone remember Flash? Yeah, rest in peace, right? I feel like I should do a moment of, yeah. It was really great, but since the sort of downfall of Flash, I've moved over to doing some web animation and some mobile development, which both use kind of similar skills. Quickly, I got interested in developing for mobile when I had a kid. Also, this coincided with the downfall of Flash. I'll show you this video of my kid when he was about 10 months old, and you'll see he uses a pretty unusual touch gesture that we don't often program for. This video has no sound, so don't worry, the sound engineer. So here he is walking toward my iPod, which is how we trained him to walk, with like a video on it, and then he puts it in his mouth. Yeah, delicious. It's a funny thing to show you, but it's also kind of important because at this age, little kids are still not that able to sense things in a fine way with their hands. Actually, their tongue has the greatest density of nerve endings that allows them to really learn about things. So that's why little kids are always putting stuff in their mouths. They have much more sensation with their tongue than they do with their hands. So it's important to think about what the capabilities of a kid are physically at the point where they're using a device. Now, 10 months may be too small to be using one on his own, but a couple years later, he's way into it. As I said, I got into this because I wanted to make an app. I wanted to make an app for a tool that I used with him that was like an analog tool. It was this little board that a therapist gave me that I could slap pictures onto, like with Velcro, and pull them off to show him what was going on in his day. And as a new parent, I already had a full diaper bag, and I was always forgetting something. One day it would be the diapers, the next day it would be the wipes, the next day it would be the picture that I needed for this board. And I had really wished that I had just had it on my phone. But that app didn't exist for me to buy, and since I'm a developer, I thought, okay, I will make it. But as I started to think about it, and this is an early version, this is not done, I realized that I didn't know what the best types of interactions to include were. When we were marking activities as done, how many sound effects were good, or how many are too many? Like, is animation good, or is animation going to be distracting? Should I be tapping, double tapping? How do I handle undo? All of these questions. So I went about learning what are the best practices for designing mobile apps for kids, and that's what I'm going to share today. So we'll talk a little bit first about what are kids, what can kids do, which gestures are more or less intuitive for them. Then we'll talk about the flow of an app, how you can welcome kids into your app and then guide them through the experience to the end of gameplay. And finally, we'll talk a little bit more in specific detail about text and audio. So kids start out small, and all of the research that's out there says that kids under 2 don't necessarily benefit from screen time. But beyond that, parents are giving kids their phones, and kids can either be using apps that are good for them to be using, given that they're on the phone, or that are inappropriate, and so we might as well make appropriate ones. that can even help them learn. There are also bigger kids, right? That's a funny thing about kids, they grow, like all the time. So I can't give you a one-size-fits-all solution for how to make an app for kids. Today, I'm going to tell you about dealing with the youngest kids, and then if you're interested in older kids, you can do more research to figure out, okay, is this gesture hard for the age that I'm targeting? Last year, Apple introduced a kids category into the App Store, which didn't exist before, and you'll see right here that they separate the age ranges into 5 and under, 6 to 8, and 9 to 11. So if you want to think in sort of broad strokes, you might think about that, since that's how parents are looking for games. Whatever age you pick, you're going to need to learn about the capabilities that kids that age have, both mental and physical. And you'll want to do that through observation. I haven't done a lot of that myself, and I can't really go into that, but even just looking at a picture, which I'm going to turn around and ask you guys, you can observe quite a bit. So what do you notice about this little kid? I know, you've just had your coffee. It's kind of mean. But I'm not going to go on until you give me some answers. Right-handed. Focused. Using one finger. Yeah, she's not carrying the device. She's sitting down, and it takes up her whole lap. She's using one hand. What's the other hand doing? It's resting on the case. This is a picture from a maker of iPad cases for kids, so that hopefully you can give your iPad to your kid and they don't break it. But if she weren't using such a clunky case, that hand might actually just be resting on the screen. So that gives us a hint that we might have to deal with some unintended multi-touch. How is the device oriented? Landscape. Yeah, so she's looking at it this way, probably because the game requires that, it is oriented that way too. But it's important to realize that little kids think of screens more like a TV screen, in that they don't think about their being things off of the edges of the screen. You know, we're all really comfortable with browsing websites, and we expect there to be something below the fold. But kids don't necessarily have that mindset. They pretty much expect that they're interacting with what's exactly on the screen, and it's often, they often think of it as sort of like more like a book. It's just whatever page is in front of them is what they see. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the gestures that are most and least intuitive for preschoolers, starting with the better ones. And there are only 4. So tap is a pretty intuitive gesture. If you've watched little kids play with devices at all, you've probably seen them tap wildly, even on a computer screen, because they expect it to be a touch device. They will tap wildly. But there are still some caveats with little kids. One thing that can be hard for them to understand at first is how long a tap lasts. So any of you who are familiar with registering like a regular tap versus a long tap, you might want to think about having both of those be the same for kids. Or for me, coming from the Flash world, I was really used to a pattern of if someone was clicking something with a mouse, waiting until they had released the mouse to actually record the interaction, because they could have like moved the mouse away and changed their mind and decided not to click the button. But with little kids, it's much better to register the input on touch instead of on lift. That way they get immediate feedback that the touch is registered. Otherwise, they might think, oh, nothing happened. I put my finger down and nothing happened. Let me lift it up and put it down again. And then you start dealing with things like double tap getting recorded, or maybe some unwanted zoom happening. You also want to make sure that hit areas are large and adequately separated from each other. So for adults, I believe the guideline is 44 by 44 pixels. And you might think about having much larger areas for kids who don't necessarily have the finest motor control. And you also want to make your interactive elements visually eye-catching. So this example is a puzzle game. It's actually for dragging and dropping, not tap. But I use the example here because you can see the interactive elements are really colorful and textured compared with the rest of the screen. So it's really easy to see what kids are meant to interact with. Okay, drawing is another interaction that works really well for kids. It can be fun for them to both like do free-form drawing to draw a picture, or more structured activities like drawing a letter. The only thing is that they can have a hard time not lifting their finger up in the middle of an activity. So if you have a drawing activity, it should support partial completion. At this point, I've drawn part of the letter A and picked my finger up, and you can see that that arrow is showing, okay, you're gonna need to start again from here, from this point, to keep drawing the letter. Swipe is also a pretty intuitive gesture. You may need to give some visual cues that you want somebody to swipe. But you should also consider adding an arrow tap option because tap is slightly easier. So in this example, there's a menu at the bottom of all of these different characters that we can drag up onto the screen. And it doesn't have an arrow option. But we could think about putting arrows at either side of the menu to help a kid understand that there's more off the side of the screen. Also, you need to think about how you want to handle hit areas inside of a swipe area. Generally, you don't want any extra hit areas, but in this case, you want to be able to drag the menu both ways and then drag a character up onto the screen. So just realize that you may have multiple kinds of interactions happening in a swipe area. All right, and then the last of the easy gestures is drag and drop. And the same thing goes with this. As for drawing, kids can have trouble with keeping their finger on the screen. So where you can, support partial completion. And this is just another example of a drag and drop app. This one is you drag stickers from the side over onto the scene. And it's kind of the counter example to the simple puzzle that I showed you earlier, in that here, all of the interactive elements are flat and the background is photorealistic. So that's just to show you that you don't have to do it one way or the other. You have all of the tools of graphic design at your disposal. So it's up to you to decide how you want to do that with color, line weight, art style, animation, glowing and sparkling. Yeah, you don't have to make things like really plain, just as long as they're visually distinct and kids know what elements they can tap or drag. All right, so for the youngest kids, that's it. That's all you get, 4 gestures. The least intuitive ones, and I won't embarrass any apps by showing examples of the bad ones, but double tap is hard. Like I said, kids don't have a sense of how long to hold their finger down for a single tap necessarily, so that whole double tap timing is also kind of particular. So double tap can make kids think an app is unresponsive, but you might think about using it in parts of the app that you only want parents to access. Pinch zoom is pretty much impossible for anyone under 3. This is hard. we take it for granted, but that is hard to coordinate. In fact, while we're at it, any gesture that requires 2 or more fingers is harder than a gesture that requires just 1 finger, with the understanding that we may already be contending with fingers that are lying on the screen anyway, that we didn't plan for. Shake, tilt freaks out a lot of parents because it increases the risk of the child breaking the device. Yeah, because of the weight and size of a tablet, it can be difficult for a kid to control. So like watching your kid go like this, it's really disconcerting. It's more manageable for phones, but you probably still want to limit it in your apps. And another situation where a kid is actually holding the tablet is when they want to take a picture. So if possible, make it so that they can hold the device with 2 hands and take a picture with 1 finger without letting go, without taking a whole hand off to push a button. Flick and Fling, finally, are also not that familiar. Kids tend to think that they're supposed to drag and drop or tap, but they don't intuit flicking and flinging. So you might have to show them how to do it or program your app so that both interactions work. Okay, so that's the user gestures, and now we'll take a look at some patterns for the flow of your app to greet the kid, get them in, help them understand what to do in the activity, and all the way through the end. So you may choose to have a character who greets your kid into the app. This is a really nice thing. It's not required by any means. If you have a character from a story or a TV show, obviously that will make the most sense. And yeah, I'll play this video of this character, Super Y, greeting a kid in an app.
Super Y's Story Saver. Super You, I need your help. We need to finish each story sentence to save the day. Super Y, to the rescue. Look, it's a page from Cinderella. Let's read.
Okay, so there you saw he just basically told us what we're going to do, and he brought us into the activity. If he's going to stay throughout the learning activity, he turns into what's called a guide or a host. And that's a sort of character that you could ask questions to or get help from, or who just gives you instructions during the process. This character, Bobo, is a robot who was invented for this game. He doesn't exist outside of this game. The game is, actually, it's more like a book, kind of an interactive book, learning about light. And yeah, kids have never seen him before, but he's a happy little robot. He doesn't even talk, but if you touch his antenna, he shows you cool things that you weren't able to see without him. And it just helps to make a more human connection between the kid and the information in the app. Now, you want to have your goal of your app be as intuitive as possible so that no instructions are required. But if you do need to give instructions, what you want to do is you want to state both the objective and then how to accomplish that objective. And you should do this in both with video and with audio. Kids don't tend to follow audio instructions alone, so if you just tell it to them in the audio, it may not register for them. Show it both ways. This is a Lego app, and you'll see that the whole story is told in a visual way in terms of what the objective is and then how we accomplish it. Okay, so you saw there were pictures saying, we are taking this present to the lion at the zoo. Then we made a car. And then it showed, okay, now we need to drag a path to get the car to the zoo. So after you give instructions, maybe a kid follows them, maybe they don't. They may actually just sit and not interact with the game at all. And so apps for kids generally try to be cognizant of how long it's been since a kid interacted with the app. Because if it's been 3 or 5 or 8 seconds, maybe it's time to give the kid a reminder of what the objective is and how to accomplish it. Maybe they've forgotten, or maybe their mom was just saying like, here honey, here's a snack, or their sibling was trying to take the game away and saying, no, it's my turn. But whatever it is, if they're not interacting, you may want to sort of gently invite them and remind them of what they're supposed to be doing. This concept is called timeouts. So a timeout, after whatever interval you decide, you can give a concise suggestion for what to do next. And you can give a number of different options. And then if a kid is still not responding, you might move the game forward anyway, and just decide, okay, it's not so important that they do that task, let's move on to the next one. I'll play a video of this. This is a storybook. The text is finished reading, and the kid is supposed to be interacting with the characters, but they're not. So you see this blue blinky dot is moving. It was just on the wolf. Now it's on one pig. It moved to another pig. And back to the wolf. And since it's been so long, now a bouncy arrow has appeared saying, okay, well, maybe you just don't want to do that. Let's move on. All right. There are a few different kinds of apps. Some are really freeform. Some are storybooks. Others are more learning-oriented and have right and wrong answers. So the next couple of slides, I'll talk about those. This is my don't be mean to kids slide, which I don't expect any of you would go out and do. But getting answers wrong is something that you should expect in an app that is teaching kids stuff. That is just part of the learning process. It's totally normal, and it's a chance for us to be friendly and encouraging with kids. So what I like about this image is that Casper, the friendly ghost, remains friendly and is smiling, even though he's had to tell a kid that they've gotten an answer wrong. The best practice for dealing with wrong answers is to give tiered feedback, so 3 tiers. In this app, he's shown us a costume, and we're trying to recreate it by picking all of the right pieces. So say we're trying to make the robot. The first time that we choose a wrong costume piece, he might say, that's not it, try again. And the second time, he could say, that's not it, we're looking for the robot, try again, which gives just a little more information. And then the third one might be, that's not it, we're looking for the robot that has red dots for eyes. And you could even, at that point, start making the robot head jiggle or glow or have some kind of effect on it, like, here's the robot. And then if the kid is still not getting it, you might remind them a couple of more times with different clues, or you might just move the activity forward. You can pretty much rest assured that kids are not going to play your game through once, and that's it. It's going to live on their parents' iPad. They're going to revisit it over and over. So maybe it's not so important that they get it this time. Maybe it's too hard a task for them for this time, and 6 months later, they'll be able to do it. So feel free to move a kid forward if they're struggling for a long time. But of course, if they get answers right, you want to reward them. And if possible, you want to reflect back to them what they did that was good. So think back to that letter A. After I finish tracing the letter A, maybe the app says, great job, nice A. So great job is like, congratulations. Nice A is reflecting what I did, reminding me what I've just learned. You can also use audio effects like a trumpet blare or some animation or light movement. And we'll see an example of that later on in the deck. There are also many apps that have, after every few activities, something like this, a sticker board where kids get to pick stickers. And I don't understand the appeal of it, but kids really seem to get into it. They're like, oh yeah, next time I'm going to get the ladybug. And that's really a motivating thing. Okay, so that's for learning apps with right and wrong answers. Here's more of a freeform app where kids get to direct the action. There's no prescribed order in which they need to do any activities. This is, for example, if you have an app where kids are coloring pictures, that's also a freeform sort of app. That doesn't mean that you are off the hook for responding to user input. You should still be encouraging and react to what the kid is doing to show them that the app is registering what they're doing. So I'll show a video of this. It's a game where we feed people and animals food, and we get to pick what to cook for them. Did our volume go away? Okay, I'm gonna feed him hay, and he's like, blech, I don't want to eat hay. The horse does like the hay. But you could see, even as the kid was just opening the fridge, the guy's like he was wiggling his arm with his fork, and his eyes were kind of like looking at what we were doing. So the app is not just dead, while the kid is doing these activities that are non-guided activities. It is responding and showing the kid that there's an interaction going both ways. Finally, at the end of play, you're going to want to think about how the experience ends and what you want users to be able to do after that. So, all right, this is one kind of bad example, because in this app, which is otherwise a great app, both of these, replay and home, go to the same place. So that's kind of weird. But you should think about what kids are able to do, and also if you want to change the experience of the app after they've played through it once. So for example, in a storybook, if you have made it such that the first time through, kids have to listen to the full text on every page before they can go to the next page, then after they've gotten to the end, maybe you allow them to skip through pages and more quickly get to their favorite page. So, since we're talking about books, let's talk a little bit about text, which is useful for grown-ups, but you have to assume that preschoolers can't read. So you should design experiences wherever possible that kids can do without adult assistance. This will help them develop confidence in their own abilities. It also frees up the parent to maybe cook dinner or whatever it is they're trying to do with the 5 minutes that they've given the kid the device. You can use both audio and visual prompts. Here, this scheme has a pictorial menu. So each of those islands represents a level of the game, and the picture on the island represents what that level looks like. I'll play you a little video. You'll see that even the prompts to return to the menu, they don't use any words. We have audio. This is the cake level. And we're going to the plum tree level. For buttons, like you saw in that video and that you see here at the bottom of the screen, there are really consistent representational icons that are used for things like playing, pausing, going home, getting help. All of these things are pretty much codified, and yeah, kids don't know them the first time that they have to use them in an app, but once they've learned them for one app, they can use them everywhere, and it's much easier for a kid to learn that the triangle means play than to learn that the letters P-L-A-Y mean play. And you'd be surprised, but this is the single biggest mistake that I see in a lot of kids' apps. I see my kid able to play through a level completely on his own, and then he gets to the end of the level, and he's confronted with a page of like 6 buttons that all have text on them, saying next, previous, replay, menu, and it's ridiculous. If those are using the standard imagery, which is out there and it exists, then he can do it all by himself. All right, but you may not be able to totally get away from needing text in your app. So where you are using fonts, you want to be sure that you are using the types of letters that little kids learn in school. In fact, I'm sure that you guys looking at this are like, that's not how we learn to write in school, because you're French, and this is American, and the letter shapes that you learn might be slightly different. So in the US, we use these forms called Zehner Bloser. I don't know what it's called here in France, but use the letters shapes that kids will be able to identify. And generally, sans serifs are easier than serifs. For storybooks, you guys have probably already guessed that highlighting words as they're read aloud is a good idea. So I'll show you a video of that.
Oh, Grandma! What big teeth you have!
All the better to eat you with, my dear.
I love how she's like ready to rumble. She's a tough one. So that's a good example of that. But if you are making a storybook, you should also give the option for this to be turned off and for people to read through the book at their own pace. This is good either whether a parent is going to read the book to their kid or whether the kid is a new reader and they're going to read the book themselves. Especially reading it themselves, you can't expect them to be reading it at a certain pace. All right, sound is also really compelling, and you'll want to think about both foreground and background audio. Sound effects are a great way to give immediate feedback about input registration and to give feedback about performance of whether someone got a right answer or a wrong answer. So I said before we would see an example of sound effect for a reward that is repeating the activity back to the kid, telling them what they got right. And I'll show you that now.
Oh.
Okay, so you saw there was both a foreground sound effect for just interacting with the element at all, and then there were sound effects for getting the answer wrong and getting the answer right. When they got the answer right, it reinforced which letter they correctly placed. Background music is really great for complementing gameplay, but it's in the back seat. So choose the style carefully, monitor the volume so that it's not hard to hear the foreground audio. I mean, I think probably everyone in this room can remember the music from the video games they played as kids, right? Like you have some favorite, like the Mario Brothers theme or whatever, you could instantly recall to this day. And you remember sitting there being happy, playing the game. Because of that, you may not remember all of the sound effects, but you probably remember the music. So just please make it so it's not annoying for parents. Here's one that kind of feels like a Caribbean vacation to me.
K. K is for kite. Kite. L. L is for light. Ooh. Light.
Ugh, light. So yeah, use pretty music. Maybe try putting it on in the background all day while you're working and see if you can live with it. In terms of using audio for instructions, it's really important to keep them as concise as possible. If you have a long sentence, little kids won't necessarily remember what you said at the beginning of the sentence by the time you get to the end of it. So instead of saying something like, turn the page so that we can see what Grover's going to do next, you would say, to see what Grover's going to do next, turn the page. And that just makes sure that the last thing that they heard was the instruction that they need to follow. They don't need to remember everything that came before. Finally, for every bit of audio in your app, you need to decide whether it is interruptible or not. So if the kid taps on the menu button up there and decides to leave the page, is that possible, or do they need to finish listening to the sentence being read first? This is kind of maybe more of a programming thing for you to handle to make sure that that if you return to the menu that you stop the audio that was playing. And this is another thing that you also might consider changing on replay. So the first time through, they might have to listen to it all. The second time through, maybe not. All right, and the last little section that we need to talk about is what to include for grown-ups and how. If you have an app that allows kids to register, make a profile so that they can log in, maybe so that siblings have different settings or whatnot, it's okay to expect that a parent is going to help the kid create that login. And then afterwards, you want to make sure that kids can log in by themselves and, select their own profile using their name or a unique icon. Keep that registration and login process as simple as possible. And if you have registrations and logins, some laws apply, so I'll talk about that in a minute. But another thing that you might do for parents, actually that you need to do, if you have any content that allows kids to purchase things or link to websites or social networks or anything outside of the app, even to buy other apps that you've made, you need to put it behind what's called a parental gate or a baby gate. This is like the idea, in your house you have doorways and then you put some little gate in the doorway so kids can't pass through by themselves. The way you do it in an app is you have a really boring text link, like that for parents link up in the upper left. That's not appealing or enticing in any way. And then when kids click on it, you give them an adult level task that needs to be completed in order to continue. So I'll show you a video of this, and you'll see that the tasks are randomized. I'll tap on it 2 times, and you'll see I'll get 2 different tasks. That helps prevent kids from just memorizing what they saw the adult do last time so that they can do it themselves this time. So swipe left with 2 fingers. I didn't understand that. I'm a kid, so I just touched anywhere and it went away. Now swipe right with 2 fingers. Apple, just like a month ago, finally put up guidelines for how to use, or for how to build that, and I have a link to that in the slides. You can have a section for parent tips that explains learning objectives to parents, explains how they might guide their kids through the app. And actually, it's important to mention that parents often play with their kids. There are often times when kids have a mobile device that they're playing by themselves, but parents do spend a good amount of time with their kids. And in the parent section, you can explain, how they might help their kid understand the activity or clarify any information that's collected about their kid. That's super important. The only thing is that you can't guarantee that parents will go click on and read a lengthy parent section. Like, I find this really long, and if I'm sitting there with my kid's not going to wait for me to read through all of that before we go back to the app. So just know that you can put information there, but you should probably make it pretty concise too. You also generally don't want your apps to need a kid to get help from the parent. And if you really feel like you need to give some kind of instruction before they can use the app at all, the best practice for that is to have a modal dialogue on first start that shows how to do it at a time when the parent is most likely to be there to help, and then not require further instruction throughout the site. Yeah, so this is kind of a new initiative. I learned about it last year. The idea of having sort of professional organizations where you can get your app certified to show that it is compliant with the laws that are there to protect children's privacy. I don't know whether it will take off yet, but I wanted to give you this example. This is called Moms with Apps Know What's Inside program. And you can register and be able to put badges, like that Know What's Inside badge, in your app so that kids know, so that parents know what personal info you're collecting, how you're handling purchasing, social media, any internet connectivity, advertising, and even if you're collecting anonymized information for usage, statistics, and error reports. Complying with these sort of initiatives will help parents realize that they can trust your app, that you're going to disclose all of that stuff to them, and they'll know where to look. So the conference will have the slide deck, and many of these concepts are from the Sesame Street Rue Sésame Best Practices Guide for Children's App Development. They've done over 50 studies with young kids about how preschoolers best interact with apps. There's not a ton of other research out there. There are a few blog posts here and there, but that's the most comprehensive thing I can give you. Like I said, there's a link to Apple's new guidelines on parental gates, that Moms with Apps program. This developer exchange Facebook group doesn't sound like it has anything to do with mobile development for kids, but it does. It's actually just a group where you'll see app developers share their successes and then ask each other questions like, hey, my app got rejected because of this parental gate. Does anyone have a better idea for a parental gate appropriate for 8-year-olds? That sort of thing. Apps Playground is a website that reviews new apps for kids. So if you want to see what's new and interesting, check it out there. And I didn't draw those cute little hand gestures. Those are from this guy. So now I'd like to open up to you. We have a few more minutes left, and I'm happy to take questions. Okay.
Hi, I'd like to ask, is there any special tools to build such applications or specific tools?
Are there any special tools to build apps for kids? I don't use any special tools. I just use Xcode. I'm an iOS developer, so I can't think of any special tools. No.
There's the kids zone for the iPad and the iPod, and what are the environment for Android or Android especially? Is there any special app store for Android with child control? With
sorry, the question is there any special app part of the App Store in Android? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I should find out. I do know that the Play Store right now still has a 30-minute, like if you've bought an app, then there's 30 minutes during which your login stays valid, like when you can keep making purchases without entering a password again, and that is part of why you need baby gates. In Apple, it was 15 minutes up until recently, and I think they've just changed their settings so parents can control that better.
Hello, so my little girl has a tendency to leave the game quickly. So she enters, she plays a little bit and just leaves. How can maybe for a game developer attract kids to stay? And how can we make sure that we don't, let them stay in the game more than what the time they should stay, because there is some time for kids to play on iPads as recommended, or so that they don't take like long hours during time play. Yeah.
All right, I think the question is how can apps both deal with kids leaving the game quickly and saving their stuff, and then also put a time limit on how long kids can play. For saving, I think it's pretty much the same as what you have for any other app. So your app will get a message from the operating system telling it, quick, hurry up and save anything you want to save because you have to exit. And your app just needs to deal with that in terms of its internal data structures, or if it's saving out to core data or whatever. For managing the amount of time that kids are on the app, there isn't anything built in. I suggest a kitchen timer, just having something external. There are some tablets that are made specifically for kids that are starting to have these features inside of them, but I don't think that Android or iOS have anything built in for that. I think Leapfrog is one, and Tabio is another that makes specialized tablets for kids, and they're more likely to have this.
Hello.
Hi.
What is the best business model for this kind of apps, please?
What is the best business?
Model for this kind of apps.
I'm not a business person. I don't know.
Because I can see in the store some free apps, and
I see. You're asking, like, should it be free? Should it be paid? Should it be freemium?
freemium, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, in terms of casual gaming, you see a lot of freemium stuff. I'm not too big on any app that I see is going to have in-app purchases in it. I don't want my kids to be frustrated about how they can't get any further in the app because we don't have enough qubits or whatever weird thing they've invented. In some apps for kids, you will see that your resources regenerate after a day, and actually this gets to your question maybe of how you limit the amount of time that kids spend in the app. If they run out of whatever power source they need to keep going in the game and don't get more of it until the next day, then they'll be like, okay, well, I guess I can't play anymore today. For me, I make apps for kids with special needs, and I expect parents to buy them. Yeah. Parents do spend money on their kids, like, more than they will spend on themselves. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you for coming.